Welcome to Magic Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. March of the Machine, the Aftermath, contains 50 cards, each meant to contribute to the game's ongoing story, either by giving us closure following the Phyrexian invasion of the multiverse, or by offering a preview of things yet to come. This micro expansion had 2 chapters of written story, which I already covered in an earlier video, and today we're going to build upon that and look at the remaining 40 some odd cards to see what might be in store for us going forward. But first, why don't you check out some of the new graphic tee designs at Into the AM. Just in time for the summer season, they've got all sorts of styles that line up perfectly with your favorite characters and locations in Magic. Are they the best fitting and most comfortable shirts you'll ever own? Yes. Do you need to mulligan more? Also probably yes. But hey, at least you can save 10% on your entire order when you use promo code MAGICARCANUM, and that even stacks with their Memorial Day sale and their bundles. That's enough value to get you banned in Standard. But seriously, use my link down below to support the show and stay inspired with everyday graphic tees from Into the AM. Alright, now let's talk about what Aftermath reveals about the future. The single most important card in the set, story-wise, is definitely Spark Rupture, which confirms something has changed throughout the multiverse, and numerous characters have lost their ability to planeswalk. While the written story did not provide a concrete reason for this, it did at least supply an alternative mode of travel, and that is the Omen Paths, as seen in Open the Way. These are unstable portals that connect various planes together, and now anyone can walk through and appear somewhere else, which opens all sorts of interesting storytelling possibilities. Some planeswalkers seem happy where they are, while others are trying to recapture the thrill of exploration. Let me run down the list of desparked characters that appear in the Aftermath set. Nissa and Nahiri. Nissa is trying to return to her home of Zendikar, where Nahiri is already working to repair the damage done by herself and the invading Phyrexians. Nahiri has also decided other planeswalkers will be unwelcome here, so we are definitely heading to a confrontation between these two natives of the plane. Kiora is also on Zendikar, and I say this with some degree of confidence because even though she did not appear in the story, her showcase card frame is the Zendikar frame, and every other card in the set uses the frame for the plane the card takes place on. That's why Nissa gets the Zhalfir retro frame, even though she's from Zendikar, while Nahiri and Kiora get the Zendikar frame because that's where they are at the moment. Karn is also on Zhalfir, and he can be found with the retro frame as well. He's got a new look after creating a new body for himself during the March of the Machine story. It's a bit chunkier and rough around the edges because he made it in a hurry, but we might see it improve over time as he continues to work at it. Over on Theros, you'll find Calyx, who was created to chase down Elspeth, but never actually succeeded at that. I had predicted he would be a key player in her confrontation against the Phyrexians, but he didn't appear in the story at all, and now I have no idea what he's going to do stuck on his home plane with no real purpose in life. And to be clear, I know he's not stuck, but his only goal as a planeswalker was to catch another planeswalker, and he couldn't do it. I don't think it gets easier for him as an Omen Path walker trying to catch a literal angel. Narset and Sarkhan are both on Tarkir, where Sarkhan continues to enjoy the reign of the dragons. But Narset is one of the few characters who knows that the plane hasn't always been this way. This could lead to a future conflict, as many players also seem to think Tarkir was more interesting with the Khans in power rather than the Dragon Lords, but you'll have to let me know what you think down in the comments. Samut is on Amonkhet, trying to rebuild civilization after the Hour of Devastation left the plane in ruins. She's got help in the form of Hazaret and Dejeru, but there are still plenty of threats out there waiting to catch up to her. Because she's fast. That's her whole thing. Obnixilis is presently trapped on New Capenna, which implies he is currently unable to reach an Omen path. Remember, he fled the plane after losing in a final showdown against Elspeth, but apparently came back before the invasion and tried to wait it out, intending to side with whoever won. Unfortunately for him, he lost his spark shortly after, and so now he must endure the 5 crime families as they each come after him for revenge. This might be my least favorite of the desparked Planeswalker cards. It makes very little sense for Obnixilis to return to a plane where he was just defeated and made a ton of enemies, and it's also not really clear why he wouldn't flee through the first Omen path he finds, unless this plane doesn't have one, but the angels here did use them to reach the rest of the multiverse and spread their halo, so yeah, I don't know. Fortunately, there's one more desparked walker, and that's Tyvar, who has become one of my favorite characters, and he's now in an interesting spot. He is back home on Kaldheim, and he's got grand ambitions. He wants to return the elves to power and fill the vacuum of leadership left by the Phyrexian invasion. So those are the confirmed desparked planeswalkers as they appear in the Aftermath expansion, and pretty much all of them are either conveniently already on their home plane, or in Nissa's case, are on their way there, or they just made some really bad choices and are now paying for it. Pretty convenient, the Pinstripe Suit District didn't fall with Park Heights. Anyway, those are the former Planeswalkers, but there is a lot more in this set just begging to be talked about. Coppercoat Vanguard, Jarina, and Dranith Ruins all take place on Ikoria, and collectively confirm the humans are still around and still battling the plane's fearsome monsters, and they've lost at least one major city and are now taking steps to reclaim it. Deification shows us a monument on Theros representing Elspeth, who has a history with that plane, but is also now basically the savior of the entire multiverse. Some people see this card and take it to mean she will ascend to godhood here, perhaps replacing the fallen Heliod, but I think she'll have more of a role to play on her home plane of New Capenna first. Speaking of which, Metropolis Reformer tells us that the angels of New Capenna are now turning their attention to the demons who had imprisoned them and drained their halo, while Rebuild the City shows that the common folk are not going to let the Phyrexian building materials all around them go to waste. Rocco, the street chef, will make sure everyone is well fed while they rebuild, and future visits here will retain the plane's identity as a crime-ridden, towering metropolis with the addition of angel cops looking to enforce law and order. From there, we can jump over to Ixalan, which, surprise, surprise, still has dinosaurs, and they're being used to help rebuild things too, but we've also got some very interesting cards set here. The first is Filter Out, which shows one of the plane's merfolk purifying the waterways. Even though the Phyrexian oil has been rendered inert, each plane will have to find a way to get rid of it because it is still at least a pollutant, and at worst, it could become active again without much warning. Gold-forged Thopteryx gives us a clue regarding the fate of 2 other planeswalkers who didn't get their own cards in this set, and that's Saheeli and Huatli, who are apparently now worlds apart, which implies they too have lost their sparks. I predict our return to Ixalan later this year will include a legendary creature card for a desparked Huatli, but it might be a while before we see one for Saheeli. Kaladesh doesn't get much representation in Aftermath, just a new version of Pia Nalar, who happens to work great with most versions of her own daughter, Chandra. At least the ones that exile some number of cards from your deck and let you play them. Now you get a free Hasty Thopter to go with it. I want to pause here and point out, Aftermath is allegedly a story-driven expansion, and yet many cards don't even have flavor text. So mechanical connections to the narrative have to do a lot of heavy lifting. Chandra's mom having clear synergy with Chandra is a great example. It reinforces the connection between these characters without using flavor text or even having them appear together in the art, which is one of the brighter spots of this whole expansion. I just wish we got more cards like that. Unfortunately, Kamigawa comes up a little short here. We do get a new version of Nashi, and they tried to make it feel like he's carrying out Tamio's legacy, but caring about legendary cards in your graveyard feels like it would be a lore hold mechanic, or at least involve white somehow. And there are no green, non-changeling rats, and only one in blue, so the tribal thing here also feels tacked on. At least we've got Blot Out and Death Rattle Oni to remind us that the gangs still have a presence on the plane, and now demon spirits do too. They were absent during Neon Dynasty, and we know Boseiju and many kami were lost during the Phyrexian invasion, which might have given the demons the foothold they needed to re-enter Kamigawa. I suspect the next time we visit the plane, things will not be all neon lights and nightclubs. On Innistrad, however, maybe we are about to have a Halo rave. We've got Sigarda, still protecting the humans, and now supercharged thanks to her angelic sisters from across the multiverse. The vampires also seem comfortable with their position. Markov Baron is literally sitting on a throne made from dismembered Phyrexian pieces, and there is no shortage of blood for them to enjoy out of their goblet. Perhaps they got word about not rotating out of standard later this year and are celebrating early. This fall, we'll head back to Eldraine, where citizens are already mourning the loss of their king and queen, but still making time for training, so that next time they'll be ready to prevent such a tragedy. Ayara's Oathsworn is the standout card here, though, because Ayara herself was Phyrexianized in March of the Machine. So, is this knight questing after a magical item that might bring her back? The wilds are full of ancient magics and powerful artifacts, including the Lost Cauldron of Eternity, which many players speculate could be a useful item for healing the damage done during the invasion. Over on Ravnica, Niv Mizzet is still the living guild pact and can now be ordered on the Taco Bell app. And he's got to figure out how best to rebuild from the horrors inflicted by Vraska and the completed members of the Golgari Swarm. Their undercity upheaval has altered the very landscape of the city, and since they were also the plains farmers, we might be seeing food shortages affect the other guilds on our next visit. I should not work on these videos so close to lunchtime. Anyway, earlier I mentioned my excitement in seeing Tyvar's story play out on Call Time, but he's not the only hero from the plane found in this set. Arnie has added another hood ornament to himself, presumably after headbutting a Phyrexian, and Cosmic Rebirth implies the original world tree might be able to regrow itself, which could help stabilize the omen paths going forward. But the one that sticks out to me here is Feast of the Victorious Dead, because it has some of the most awkward flavor text I think I've ever seen. Specifically, the term beat up Elish Norn just feels very out of universe. I cannot imagine a bunch of burly Norsemen saying beat up in between long gulps of ale from their mugs. Surely they would be more descriptive when they boast, right? The School of Strixhaven is being rebuilt as seen on campus renovation, but we don't know if Liliana is involved or if she still has her spark. Deans Plarg and Nasari seem to be okay though, which is odd because at least one of them was definitely a Phyrexian encountered by the kids during the March of the Machine side stories. Kolaghan Warmonger is another card representing the warring factions of Tarkir, and now that their Phyrexian invaders have been dealt with, they can go back to caring about important things, like dragons, and making hasty attacks against each other to find more dragons. Tazri is still alive on Zendikar, and no longer cares about ally cards. I don't really have anything clever to say about her other than she seems to be designed from the ground up to work specifically with one of Ikoria's companions, so maybe an Omen Path will bring them together someday. I don't know. Jolriel is alive on Zalfir. She has a history with Kaervek, who we learned escaped his amber prison during the Brothers War set story, which feels like a million years ago, But now that Zalfir is connected to the rest of the multiverse, this guy could show up anywhere and become a localized threat for some unfortunate plane. You can learn more about Kaervek and how real life can interweave with the magic story in my preview video for his card from M21. Just don't read any of the comments there unless you want to see some of the worst parts of our otherwise amazing community. Wrapping things up, we've got a few cards set on Dominaria. Tolarian Contempt and Vesuvan Drifter are mostly name drops of famous places, but they show how the people of the plane here are adjusting to life after yet another Phyrexian invasion featuring sleeper agents. Urborg Scavengers are making the best of the situation by collecting the discarded Phyrexian bits and finding new uses for them, and Danitha has taken up the heavy position of leadership expected from her on account of her bloodline. And that's it, I think. Any cards not talked about here appeared in the story recap video, so collectively, we have looked at all 50 cards from March of the Machine, The Aftermath. What are we left with, really? Did this micro-expansion achieve its goal of tying up loose ends from March of the Machine and introduce new plots for us to enjoy in future stories? Kinda. As I said at the start, Spark Rupture is the glue that holds it all together, with 10 planeswalkers now demoted to legendary creatures, but we got no information about what caused it. We got a look across multiple planes, but most of those cards maintained the positions established by the end of March of the Machine. Places like Ravnica and New Capenna have to rebuild. Eldraine has lost its leaders, and Dominaria has already found a new one, but everywhere it's mostly still just people digging through rubble. Interesting places like Theros, where we lost 5 gods, are relegated to a single card, and it doesn't even have flavor text, so we don't really know what's going on there. Some future conflict is laid out. Nissa and Nahiri on Zendikar, Narset and Sarkhan on Tarkir, and Kamigawa will probably have a demon problem. Fortunately, the Emperor is there to stay. Oh, what's that? You didn't know the Wandering Emperor lost her spark and is grateful to be stuck on her home plane? Yeah, it wasn't part of this set, or any of the official stories. You had to watch a special piece of loading ready run content to hear about it. I am all for Magic trying out new ideas. They have to keep the game interesting and fresh as it rolls past its 30th anniversary. On paper, an epilogue set is kind of clever. You get to inject a few new cards into Standard, but they can be more complex than usual, and they can even affect formats like Pioneer or Commander. Trying to use it as a Marvel-style post-credits scene for one of the biggest storylines you've had in a decade, however, might have been too ambitious, especially with only 2 written stories to explain what we're seeing, and then an oddly placed cross-promotion with Rhystic Studies and LRR to fill in some gaps. This set could have been something really special, a love letter to the fans of the game's massive story. These packs could have been amazing to collect, either by being less expensive or by having more cards in them. But asking players to pay full retail for 5 cards, that is undeniably greedy. As a self-proclaimed lore mage, I haven't felt this disappointed by a story tie-in product since the War of the Spark novels. It has become quite clear, to me, Magic does better with small-scale stories featuring complex characters dealing with simple plots in fantastical settings. Jace and Vraska explore their attraction to each other while searching for a supremely powerful magical artifact on a lush jungle island teeming with dinosaurs, vampires, merfolk, and pirates. Ixalan is often cited as one of the best story arcs in the history of the game because it plays to all of Magic's strengths, and this is in stark contrast to March of the Machine and The Aftermath. Here, we've got simplified characters. The bloated roster of Planeswalkers necessitates some of them making decisions just to drive the plot forward, and the plot needs it because it is a sprawling mess. You have a rebel faction within the Phyrexians and an invasion army reaching out across an uncountable number of planes using a tree grown from stolen sap that was corrupted but also still has a pure core that a planeswalker is able to bond with. And then you've got oil that can instantly corrupt anyone it touches but can be completely rendered inert by removing one key figure from the chain of command. Toss in some angels, a guest appearance by Sarah, the timely arrival of an entire continent of highly trained warriors, and the ability to negate massive physical changes to characters consumed by the oil, and you are left with an incredibly complex plot that somehow mostly takes place within a bunch of closed spheres built with HeroScape game tiles. I am looking forward to a quieter era of storytelling. The upcoming sets for Eldraine and Ixalan should have the smaller scale I'm interested in, but I am torn because there should be meaningful fallout from the Phyrexian invasion, but I don't want to experience a different version of the people got to work rebuilding for every plane we visit over the next 2 years. To be clear, I am still optimistic about the future of Magic's story. Aftermath does tease some interesting conflicts, and the cards look amazing, especially when given their respective showcase treatments. I just wish this product had been a bit more accessible for interested players, and I wish it was given the narrative support it so desperately needed to make it a compelling product. But what about you? Now that you've looked at every card in the Aftermath, how do you feel about this epilogue expansion? Would you like to see them try it again in the future? Or is this an idea that should just be considered desparked on arrival? Let me know down in the comments, and check out my link for Into the AM while you're down there. Then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya!